Welcome to the 51st reading of my memoir, The Innocence of Guilt. Carefree dating. The period from June till November of 1961, the year I turned 19, was my reckless fling at carefree dating with a bit of manipulative behavior thrown in for good measure. A never-to-be-repeated series of relationships attuned more to my sewing mates at the factory, who never seemed to take any boy seriously, than somebody like me, who breathed intensity the way others inhale air. A unique and precious time period because of what would take over afterwards, rendering those few months of freedom and carefree testing of the waters a rare gift, given and then so horribly snatched away. A girl at youth group set me up on a blind date. For a few glorious weeks I went out with John, a cheerful, slim, handsome boy with fair hair and blue eyes. John and I went to the beach, and I regularly watched him in his cricket whites playing the boring game at the lower castle park, up to going anywhere he wanted, simply to be with him. It wasn't enough to keep him. When he left, I didn't beg him to take me back. I knew the uselessness of such desperation. A second blind date, this time with Peter, a baby-faced, brown-haired, brown-eyed boy, not unattractive, but not a boy I could ever love. The chemistry wasn't there. I ought never to have said yes to going out with him. Agreeing to it opened up a dark side of my personality that did him nothing but harm. I wasn't interested in talking with him about the loss of his father, only 1 year dead. What did I care? Fathers were all dead to me, my own relationship with mine being on the far side of remote. Peter owned a Vespa scooter, and I loved riding on the back of it, clinging onto him as we hit 60 miles an hour along winding country roads, flying by green fields and hedges, fresh air strong against my face, going somewhere. It didn't matter where, as long as we were in motion. Only when we stopped did the pressure manifest itself, the strain of pretending to love him. I lied because of my addiction to always needing to be needed. He talked of us getting engaged, and I said nothing. I suppose in his mind my silence meant I agreed, because he behaved as if we were getting married. I experienced a perverse pleasure in knowing Peter nurtured feelings for me he didn't realize were not reciprocated. I used Peter, and I broke his heart. I didn't care. I had no empathy for him at all. When I finished with him, Mum gave me a bad time over it. She obviously considered him her future son-in-law. Several weeks after I broke up with Peter, I went to a dance at the Corn Exchange with Gwenda and Joan from work, and sat a perfect wallflower, as girls without dance partners were called then, on a chair against the wall in my new lilac frock, waiting for a boy, any boy, to come over and ask me to dance with him. I stared at the floor while my feet tapped automatically to the rhythm of the live band playing in one corner of the room, when a voice said, "Do you want to dance?" Looking up, I saw a slim, bespectacled boy with black frizzy hair. He held out one hand towards me, so I left the security of the chair and walked out onto the dance floor with him. James said he'd been watching me, trying to get up the courage to ask me to dance. He'd thought I looked so lonely sitting all by myself in my pretty lilac frock. Loneliness was something he said he could identify with, and so we started seeing each other on a regular basis. Two rather odd lost souls, coming from such differing economic backgrounds, yet in our isolation needing each other. James was completely out of my league, coming as he did from a wealthy family. The first time he took me to his house, I knew we moved in different circles. The country house with its gravel driveway for the cars, nameplate Utopia by the front door, and spacious rooms inside told me immediately, what a strange name for a house. I looked it up in the dictionary. Utopia, an imaginary place or state of things in which everything is perfect. Was everything perfect in James's world? It appeared to be, in the material sense at any rate. He never seemed to be without money. My new boyfriend owned a car, a huge improvement on the Vespa, as I didn't have to wear a helmet and mess my hair up. He introduced me to the craziest activities. I took part in a ban the bomb protest, stopping the traffic while marching down the middle of the high street following a black draped coffin, a dramatic public statement suiting my personality. I danced evenings away at the jazz club and attended socialist party meetings. James's parents were communists during the war and still carried on their left-wing socialist practices. So did he. You should hold your head up high because you work in a factory, he said to me. There's no shame in being a member of the working class. Still, so embarrassed at him seeing the tiny little red brick rental row house where I lived, I didn't want him to drive me home. Although he showed no shock at the sight, I determined never to invite him inside to meet my parents. I needn't have worried, as once Mom found out his name, she refused to have him anywhere near her. Do you realize who you're seeing? She said in disgust. What do you mean? I ventured. I worked with his mother during the war. They're commies, the whole lot of them. So I could never take James home. I'd better not fall in love with him, I thought, but I didn't think I would. I was more attracted to the alternative, slightly bohemian lifestyle he represented. Our favourite hangout was a cellar in the high street, converted into an espresso coffee bar. In its dimly lit interior, we sat around tables, chatting with his group of artistic friends, boys in drain-pipe trousers and embroidered waistcoats, accessorized with pocket watches on long chains. I copied the styles of left-leaning anti-establishment girls, beatnik-style clothes, tight trousers, long sweaters halfway to my knees, layers of chains around my neck, flat shoes, and shoulder-length hair not teased or curled. A few weeks into our relationship, he pestered me to sleep with him. We'd done no more than kiss in the comfort of his parked car, and I intended nothing more. I didn't love him, and I knew he didn't love me. I didn't gaze into his dark, almost black eyes, attempting to lose myself in them as with Patrick or Ben. I wasn't using him. I enjoyed his company. His intellectual appearance I found intriguing, but all that aside, I wasn't going to sleep with him, which we both knew didn't mean that tranquil, temporary state we all slip into at the end of a busy day, but something much more frenzied and permanent, the loss of my virginity. As it turned out, I didn't have to face the uncomfortable task of breaking up with James. He didn't turn up for our next arranged date. I never saw him again, unless a few days later, making my way up Butt Road towards home, a black car appeared over the rise of the hill. Typically, I wasn't wearing my glasses, so couldn't see the driver, but it looked as if he waved at me. I didn't give it another thought until I reached home, and then it hit me that it could have been James's car. What would he think of me ignoring him? Waves of guilt rushed through my mind like a flash flood. I repeated the scenario of that moment on the hill, trying to convince myself I hadn't done anything wrong. The more I repeated it, the worse the guilt. Worrying thoughts came whilst at work, making it difficult to concentrate. The thoughts charged me with the worst crime in the world. Pressure from paying attention to them, as well as having to deal with the world outside their condemning message, resulted in pounding headaches. I wished I could tell somebody what I suffered from, but the rational side of my mind told me it was so stupid nobody would listen. I possessed no name anyway for what compelled me to repeat sentences or whole phrases in my mind of supposedly reassuring statements designed to convince myself I hadn't done something disastrous. A seeming hiccup in my brain, holding me hostage on a treadmill of repetitive thoughts and rituals. The rituals were relatively easy to hide from others. I wasn't compulsively turning off light switches 20 times before leaving a room, arranging items in perfect symmetry or order, or washing my hands repeatedly to the point of making them raw. I still copied out letters I sent for fear I may have harmed somebody by my words, and reread them furiously until I received an answer back, but nobody but me knew of that time-consuming task. The rituals took place mostly in my head, and annoyingly stayed there. The most difficult part of the affliction was having to listen to the constant refrain of, "You've hurt somebody so badly, you will never be forgiven." A bit like being on death row in prison, I imagined. Repentant, given the death sentence anyway, terrible regret, but too late. You're doomed, your life thrown away, no more chances. Sadly, the voice condemning me belonged to myself, not a court of law or anybody I might choose to ignore or at least have a good yell at. In between attacks, relative normalcy prevailed, but the fear of the next one constantly hung over me. Any trivial incident could start the cycle going. Some difference of opinion with a friend, or any time I asserted myself in some way against somebody. Doubt crept in that I ought not to have spoken my mind for fear of hurting the other person's feelings, and then the self-searching of my motives drove me to the repetitive ritual for relief. Worse than the panic attacks, worse than Dad's yelling and hitting, worse than the disputes with Mum, worse than being sad and lonely. That's why I stopped believing in hell, even though my church taught its existence. I knew that hell existed right here on earth. I made the best of it under the pressure of the new circumstances, managed to get to work, kept church activities going, but always I waited with a quiet terror for the dark cloud to descend and destroy days of peace. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, or comment on this reading, and hopefully you will tune in to the next one. Bye for now.